Welcome back to the programme. Now, there are many different names for it. The most common is conversion therapy, efforts to change, suppress or divert people's sexual orientation. It is bogus science, dismissed by every mainstream medical organisation, but it's used in at least 80 countries around the world. Practices that range from talk therapy to electric shocks or what's called corrective rape. Well, a new report has looked at the reach of conversion therapy and the consequences. Well, I'm joined by Maria Schodin from the Outright Action International, who authored this report, as well as two people who've been through conversion therapy, Matthew Shurker and Joseph Hyman. Thanks all of you for being here on the programme. Matthew, let me start with you first of all, because you told your father that you were gay when you were 16, didn't you? Tell me what happened then.
My father, he, showed me love and showed me that that he was going to be by my side in the conversation that when I came out to him. However, my father did some research and met a therapist, a licensed professional here in New York, who explained to him that my condition, which the therapist described as SSA, which stands for same-sex attraction, as a mental illness, that this was something that I could actually overcome and heal. And what was told to be only 6 weeks worth of treatment to treat my homosexuality turned into a 5-year episode in my life where I had psychologists and psychiatrists attempting to cure me of my homosexuality, which took many different forms.
Tell me more about those forms, because I think this was back in 2004. You'd never, I read, had met a gay person at that time. And I was staggered actually to read that your therapist told you you need to avoid your mothers and sisters completely.
Yeah, as you're seeing in the US and in Europe, these conversion therapists are following a model that all homosexuality or anything LGBT stems from childhood traumas and learning the roles of males and females. And being the youngest son and the only son in my family, I had 2 older sisters, I was immediately diagnosed with having too many female role models in my life. And that meant not speaking to my mother and 2 sisters for 3 years, which had a devastating impact on my life. But really, the therapist explained that was so that I understand that women are not my peers and that men are so I learned what my masculinity is, understand that men are my peers, and when my therapist believed I was ready to embrace women as my opposite, as my sexual partner, or one day, which they believed I would marry a woman, this was their way of training me, almost like in a Pavlovian way, to understand that women are supposed to be the desired object and not males.
Matthew, I said it staggered me when I read it. It staggered me even more when you went through the detail and actually just described what you went through. Let me bring Joseph in, because Matthew was 16 when he entered that process, he was saying. Tell me how old you were and how you ended up in conversion therapy.
So I was 17. I grew up in a religious community in London, and I knew I was gay from about the age of 10 and found the therapy online, saw it as a solution to a problem that was posed to be by my community, that being gay and part of the Jewish community wasn't necessarily a feasible future.
Wasn't compatible?
Yes.
That was the pressure that you felt. So tell me, what did it involve? I mean, you just heard some of what Matthew went through. What did your conversion therapy actually involve?
Mine and Matthew's experiences were quite similar. It was conventional in the sense that it was talk therapy, but while therapy aims to help you reach self-actualization, acceptance, this was aimed to make me feel like I shouldn't accept myself, like I should push any part of my identity down, and often made me feel very lonely, very isolated from my family as well, from friends, from anyone really.
Let me bring Maria in, because you've done this report. You've looked at the reach of conversion therapies, whatever they call it in different countries. How common are the stories you've just heard? How common are these practices around the world?
Well, unfortunately, they are quite common, and we particularly wanted to study sort of what the situation is like outside of Europe and North America, because those are more well known, I think. But So we looked into the situation in Africa and Asia and Latin America and the Caribbean. And unfortunately, we found examples of conversion therapy in all of these regions, often driven by religion, with faith leaders and religious institutions being drivers, cheered on by families.
And I read in the introduction, I mean, we heard from both Matthew and Joseph the various talk therapies and pressure, but I mean, when you read some of the things that happen elsewhere, the electric shocks, the rape, it is utterly alarming, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, I think all forms of this, I mean, it's not conversion and it's not therapy, but I think so-called conversion therapy, it's still the sort of accepted terminology for it. But it's really horrifying, and there are many examples of physical abuse, including people being forced to fast, not even getting liquids for days at a time in an attempt to change them. When, of course, as we know, society is what needs to change, not the individual people.
I'll come back to that point in a minute. Matthew, back to you. What was the point, what was the moment that you were able to break away? So you will go through this for 5 years or so. What was the moment that actually changed in your mind?
I think it was the need for evidence that it worked. And I had asked my therapist throughout this 5 years my interest in meeting other men who had successfully become heterosexual. And what my therapist did was introduce me to other men who married women and had children, but all of those men had identified and shared that their attraction for the same sex or other males never diminished in any way, and that the best that they had gotten at becoming heterosexuals was just not responding or acting on what they truly desired. And I found with many of them, they had many broken homes, not faithful marriages with their wives, and that just became, that for me was not something to be inspired by, nor was that a life that I sought out for myself. So going through the pain of that 5 years, that's not something I was willing to do.
Let me ask the same question then to Joseph, because you were at university, weren't you,
Yes.
when the penny dropped for you? Tell me briefly about that.
So it was a combination of realizing that it didn't work, like Matthew, but also it was seeing role models online living religious, happy lives as gay men. And that really had a huge impact on me, being able to see role models in the privacy of my university dorm room and be inspired by them.
Just a final question to all of you. Maria, first of all, I mean, in some countries it has been made illegal. Other places it is still clearly going on. Should this practice, whatever it is called, be made illegal worldwide now?
Yes, I do think it should be made illegal, but I think to get there, I think it's important that we see both religious institutions and leaders, and we see mental health professionals, and we see the World Health Organization, and all the sort of professional associations. We need to see them publicly condemn it, to say that it doesn't work and no one should try to change someone else to make them conform to the norms.
A final answer then from both Matthew and Joseph. Matthew, first of all, I mean, where are you now in terms of how you view the past and how you now deal with the present and view the future?
So Born Perfect, which is a legal organization introducing the legislation here in the United States, we've seen the most traction here, where now 18 U.S. states have made it illegal for minors, anyone under the age of 18. And that's we've had a lot of success in the last 5 years, but with our administration here in the U.S. And the Supreme Court, it's getting more and more difficult to continue. I'm very optimistic that conversion therapy will end. It's going to be a tough road ahead of us. I think what works in our favor is that every community in the world is directly in touch with the LGBT community, because we live and exist in every community on the planet. And in an odd way, that is to our advantage to share with all of our communities globally that this is something that is a part of the human condition. And as you know, I agree, we need governments and religious institutions to be outspoken. Like about a year ago, we had the Church of England publicly state that they condemn conversion therapy. And I think the combination of government and religious institutions coming together, I am optimistic about the future
Well, let me put the same final question to Joseph here in the studio. Joseph, where are you in terms of what you've been through, how you view yourself now, how you view the future? Are you angry when you look back at all the pain that you described? I mean, how do you view it?
I think that the impact of conversion therapy, that abuse that I went through, will last throughout my life. I think that what's sad, it's not in the past for many people. It's still going on today. I think that in terms of my experience and my hope for the future is that more families and community figures, as well as governments and religious organizations, will be speaking about this on a local level, on a personal level, on a family level, to make their kids aware that this is not an acceptable path to lead.
Well, Joseph Hyman and Matthew Shirker and Maria Shodin, thank you all for joining me on the programme. It's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for your time. Now we're going to take a short break. Do stay with us on Global, because we're back with all the day's headlines here in a moment. We're back discussing Brexit and all the ramifications from the British government move yesterday. Join us in a moment.